Thank you for joining us today. It's been another busy week since we were last here. The number of initial unemployment claims is down again from last week, from 54,000 last week to 50,000 this week. This demonstrates the effectiveness of our efforts to keep fraudulent claims at bay and showing indicators of the economy reopening. Today, I'll focus on updates to both Operation 100%, which is our effort to get payments to those who have been waiting the longest, and restarting payments for some customers who were impacted by the fraud effort. On both of these fronts, we are making progress. In some cases, it's not as quickly as we or our customers would have hoped for, but we now have enough data to set expectations so folks can plan and prepare. I'll start with payments paused due to fraud and speak about the fraud area first. We are moving 300 ESD staff members onto this work starting today, and we are hoping to bring in the National Guard starting next week. With this boost, for those who were receiving benefits but had their benefits paused around May 15th due to our efforts to combat the criminals perpetrating imposter fraud, we expect to have their identity issues resolved by Friday, June 19th. So payments can restart for legitimate customers. Again, this is for those who were receiving benefits that were paused the weekend of May 15th. We posted a notice about this to our social media yesterday that you may have seen, but I'll share a quick run through of the timeline with you. We generated about 200,000 claims in the identity queue the weekend of May 15th, which we've now reduced by more than half. Of that remainder, roughly 42,000 were receiving benefits prior to that time, and those payments were paused as a result of the fraud net we cast. This is the group that we'll be resolving by June 19th. And I use that term resolve very deliberately because some are legitimate and they will be allowed, and some are not and they will be denied. The rest of those numbers have other issues that were already holding up payments, and there are also others who have more recent flags from after mid-May that require further identity analysis. We will continue to work as quickly as we can to resolve all of these claims with the support of this incremental staffing. This also supplements the increases we had already made, in which our investigative staff grew from 24 to 300. I know that people are also wanting to know the status of our fund recovery efforts. We're continuing to turn over every stone to regain every dollar we can. In the meantime, we updated Secretary Scalia and his team at the Department of Labor, and we'll be speaking with them later today, and with that, hopefully sharing what we have done around recovery so that other states might learn from our experience. Now let's talk about Operation 100%. As we all know, criminal acts of fraud against our state have unfortunately thrown a wrench in the works on our push to get payments to those who have been waiting the longest. We had targeted June 15th to resolve all claims in adjudication for those who have applied before May 1st. We hope to have those who have been unpaid and in adjudication as of May 1st all resolved by the end of the month, if not sooner. The team is still doing detailed analysis to get a more definitive timeline soon, and we'll share further details as soon as possible. That doesn't stop any of the work that's been happening with our adjudicators, and they are continuing apace in resolving people's claims issues as quickly as they can. We know how frustrated and desperate many of these people are, and we are pulling out all the stops so those who are eligible will receive payment as quickly as possible. To that end, we've trained up additional staff to do ID verification and are continuously evolving our customer service skills to more efficiently and quickly serve Washingtonians. Now, finally, I'll also touch on the news that came yesterday around an audit of ESD from the State Auditor's Office. I want to share up front that we welcome this opportunity, both in the spirit of continuous improvement and most importantly, in our primary charge to provide ever better service to the people of Washington. We believe that the key learnings from this audit will help not just ESD, but all of state government. Our goal in this unprecedented crisis has been and continues to be getting benefits out to eligible Washingtonians as quickly as possible. We look forward to working with Auditor McCarthy and her team to accelerate the work that will meet that goal. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. First, we're going to go to Lindsay Sheldon. Lindsay, you should be unmuted.
Okay. Are you able to hear me? I think I've unmuted that.
Lindsay.
Yeah. Hi, Commissioner. First question, I'm wondering, just before I launch into these, a couple others, I wanted to ask you if you could clarify where things stood with the number of people in that ID verification. I heard you mention a lot of numbers. I heard you mention 42,000, and I know that the goal at this point was to be at about 90,000. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding where the ESD is right now.
I was trying to not put so many numbers out there, so I'll go through the math now. We started at about 190,000, so that's why I said about 200,000 that were flagged the weekend of May 15th. That number is now down to 78,000 total. But of that 78,000, there are 42,000 who were already receiving payments. And so we are focusing between now and next Friday on getting those folks restarted in their payments. That other 36,000 are individuals who, while they now have an identity issue on their claim, they had other issues as well. So they will be addressed as a part of the course of business. So for example, our adjudicators are now trained to also do identity verification. Our other intake agents are getting trained on doing identity so that as they're looking at those other issues, they are also looking at identity. But we're separating out those groups so that we can accelerate getting people paid who already were receiving payments. And also recognizing that a significant portion of those are going to be fraudulent claims. And so making sure that we are ferreting those out and not doing continued claiming for, which we're not right now, doing claims for criminals. Does that help explain it a little bit, Lindsay?
Yes, it does. I wanted to ask about, I've seen and heard from people who are saying that they have already uploaded identity documentation and they are now being asked to do that another time. Some people are saying that they've uploaded identity documents and then have been asked to upload them again, and then in some cases a third time. Just wondering what is going on there.
So our system, so we are working on a problem right now with our vendor, with the system, regarding how we clear and then sustain that clearing process. Our system was not designed for doing bulk clearing and bulk issue setting. And so we are working through that so that those individuals who have been cleared do not need to resubmit information. And we are working towards resolving this quickly with our vendor to make sure that that problem does not persist. We are aware of it and we are working on it.
So for people who are receiving those repeated prompts to upload documents they have already loaded, should those people ignore the prompts? Because obviously they're concerned it might hold up getting their money.
So we are working on the communication out to those individuals as well. But at the same time, here's where the challenge comes in, Lindsay, is that yes, they should ignore it for right now. However, there are some people where some of their information has changed and where we do actually need that information again. So we are rapidly working to resolve this, and we'll have more information and instructions for them, hopefully by later today that we release. So for now, they should hold off on uploading more information, and then we will have more instruction later today. But we are aware of the problem. It is a problem, and we are working on resolving it with our vendor.
And in that thread, Are people also being asked to upload documents after that sort of fraud crackdown? I've heard from people who say, I didn't get asked between May 15th and May 22nd, but I did get asked to upload, ID docs June 1st. And I have been receiving payments up till now. So I'm just they're kind of wondering, okay, is this continuing even though they have been receiving these payments?
We are continuing to do analysis and determine what are different characteristics that we need to identify for what might be fraudulent behavior. And we will continue those countermeasures. So additional people may be impacted by those countermeasures, many of whom are criminals and are fraudulently trying to claim, and some of whom are legitimate. And our efforts don't stop. It's like trying to track a drop of water in a river, Lindsay, which is why we put a marker on May 15th as when we did a large amount of identification on this. But we have continued to do identification of those individuals whose characteristics may be fraudulent behavior. We are getting better and getting more surgical so that now it's a higher concentration of fraudulent claims than it would be legitimate claims. And we are also working to do that verification more quickly. So as we clear this large pool, we'll be able to address additional ones over time in a much speedier way.
And one question about Operation 100%. I'm wondering if you can talk about what is the ESD doing to prioritize the claims that have been waiting the longest? Because looking at the latest data on the website, I do still see, it looks like there's about 80 people at that 13-week point. And a couple weeks ago, I think it was at 96. So that's really just movement of 16 claims there. So can you tell us what the ESD is doing to clear out those people who have been waiting the longest?
So we are working very hard to clear those people who are there the longest. As somebody who has dug in deeply on some of those numbers, it's a combination in terms of how people are still waiting that amount of time. In some cases, it's that those individuals have not responded when we've called. In some cases, it's that there are additional areas that need to be worked. But most of those folks who have been waiting the longest have been contacted, and those issues are being worked. So the team is prioritizing those. In addition to that, what we are working to distinguish are those people who have been waiting longest, or actually those people in the adjudication queue overall, and I mentioned this in my remarks, some of whom are actually already receiving payment. It's just that they're receiving conditional payment, versus some people are not receiving payment at all. So we are working to identify those who have not been receiving payment at all, and we'll be prioritizing them, again, from oldest to newest. So that's what we are working on in terms of, again, continuing to dig down into the data so that we can be more targeted to address and relieve the needs of more Washingtonians.
So in those numbers that we see, Operation 100% from 1 to 13 weeks, some of those people are actually receiving conditional payments?
Yes, they are, and we are working to distinguish that. And we will have updated numbers soon on that. We don't have the fidelity that we need, and only once I'm confident in those metrics, we will then share that out.
That would be very helpful, because I think it's been the impression that the numbers that we've seen there have been people who haven't gotten their money yet.
I hear you. I totally hear you, and I agree.
Okay. And how many Tier 3 adjudicators are there? Have you added? Because I know you talked about adding on the National Guard, but I know that Tier 3 is extremely, that's skilled level of adjudication. So how many Tier 3 adjudicators have you been able to add, and how does the National Guard fit into that? And that's my last question.
Well, we'll get back to you with the specific number on that, Lindsay. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I have it deeply buried in my inbox, and the team will pull that up. And I also just got an update from my team with regards to your question around the numbers of individuals who are unpaid versus paid in that 35,000. And we need to get some clarity on that. We're going to follow up with you and the team. Again, I don't have enough fidelity to feel confident in sharing out what that might look like.
Thank you. Did you say what the National Guard was doing?
National Guard will be helping initially with VID verification, and then we're going to be looking at other tasks to which we can enlist their help that will help with both those in the ID queue And as you rightfully pointed out, again, drop in the river, there are those that were May 15th, but there have been a number since then who have gone through there. And so they will be helping with, yes, some of those towards this June 19th goal, but they will also be helping with the larger goal of bringing down that identity queue and other task areas that we can identify as well.
Thank you. I'll follow up on the Tier 3 adjudicators.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Sally Ho. Sally?
Hi,
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for taking the call. Can you elaborate on the National Guard's assistant expected starting next week? How many people are coming? What will they be doing? And are they assisting with the backlog or with the fraud investigation? Can you talk about that?
We are still working on the details of the deployment of the National Guard members to this work, and we'll have more of that in the next couple of days. They will be working on the ID verification queue, the backlog with that, which helps towards how we can fight fraud and at the same time help legitimate claimants receive the benefits for which they're eligible.
Do you know how many of them are coming?
We're working
and how long?
We're working on the details of how many and how long, and we'll be able to share more of that in the next couple of days.
Okay, and the amount of money paid out fraudulently and the amount that ESD has recovered from that, are the numbers still the same? Have the estimates changed at all?
The estimates haven't changed at this point. Again, we're working very hard in order to recover more and speaking with individual banks and moving those conversations forward. But we have not yet updated our totals in terms of receiving back on the order of $337 million towards the 550 to 650 that we ballpark that might have gone out in fraudulent claims.
You mentioned that you'll be sharing lessons with the Labor Department because of this. What mistakes have you identified in ESD's process that you'll be talking to them with?
The conversation with them is actually going to be around some of the successes that we've had with regards to the recovery efforts and how we might be able to take some of the practices that we have, the collaboration with federal law enforcement and with the banking institutions, including our bank, and how might other states be able to embrace and or what is some of the generalized work. In fact, Secretary Scalia, during his testimony on Tuesday, spoke about the work that we had been doing and how we communicated with them about it. And so my hope is that that's the conversation we're going to have with them.
But has the ESD identified the mistakes made in this that contributed to the fraud?
There is a lot that we have an opportunity to learn from, and there are going to be many after-action reports. What we are focused on right now is what we can do to stop the fraud, help the victims, and recover the money. And as the state auditor pointed out, there's a lot to learn from what our experiences were, and how do we get better and grow over time, and how do we also abstract what we've learned more broadly to state government so that our practices can be better for Washingtonians going forward.
Are you confident the fraud ring has been stopped?
I am confident that we are doing everything we can in order to stop fraud. They will not be stopped. Criminals will continue to do what they are doing, and they will continue to try to run faster than we are, be smarter than we are, and they will continue to try to get into our system and steal from us. Will we be able to stop them? I look to federal law enforcement in terms of catching the criminals. What our job is to do is to make sure that we are doing all that we can to reduce the fraud and keep fraudulent claims from going out, and to let them focus on how are they catching those criminals. So this is unfortunately, a time-tested situation. If you speak with any business, any organization, it is a matter of how are you outrunning them, but the race continues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to go to Jillian Rafferty. Jillian, go ahead.
Sorry, hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, a couple of questions, but I'll try to keep it super short. My first question is, when someone applies for benefits, can they be eligible in multiple states to get paid?
In terms of eligibility in multiple states, they typically are paid in a single state and then the states reconcile between it. But I'll ask my team to provide me with some elaboration on that because it's a pretty technical situation when that happens.
Okay. Okay. And to your knowledge, does ESD, when reviewing an application, check against any other states to see if an applicant is receiving benefits in other states?
So this is actually a big conversation happening and a part of the program requirements for the PUA program, especially and the FPUC program, where people are incremented by $600 to make sure that there is some cross-matching. We participate in ICON, which is a way in which to establish and understand who is being paid in which state. And so there is an effort to do that and to make sure that people are not getting paid in multiple states. So, but again, there's some technical aspects to this that I will enlist my team to look into to either provide during this call or to follow up with you on.
Okay, thank you so much. And my last brief question, and maybe this is best addressed later in more detail, but I've heard about people who are being told they owe money to ESD based on overpaid past claims, you know, as far back as like 2013 or earlier, and their claims are being deducted like hundreds of dollars for those past claims. Is that something you guys are doing right now? And why not pause that right now because people are so desperate?
So in terms of overpayments, if people owe us overpayments, there will be deductions from payments that they receive to cover those overpayments that people might previously have had. So if, for example, somebody had an overpayment that they owed us from a previous claim, and then they continue to not pay us, and then they go on to benefits, we will do that deduction. In terms of individuals, they certainly can reach out to us and we can work on payment plans with them so that they can reduce how much they are having to pay back to us for overpayments. And we do that with some frequency in terms of developing that with individuals to make it a more manageable and more economic possibility for them. But we are responsible for when there are overpayments, whether they are last week, last month, or last year. And so, but again, we're very generous in allowing people to set up payment plans. And what we have also done, and it was at the outset of this crisis, is we also help people understand that we would be willing to either if they needed to pay late or anything like that, if there was an overpayment, that again, we would be very lenient in our approach on that.
Is that something that's written in the?
It is something
because
that we,
it's,
with regards to overpayments, when an individual has an overpayment, they are communicated that there was an overpayment. So if an individual had a previous claim and there was an overpayment, we notified them at that time of that. And so overpayments and the situation around that is very well documented. And we can get you that information if you'd like, Jillian.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, thinking about the timing, you know, it really feels like people are being kicked when they're down.
In terms of how we work with people, we want to get all the benefits for which they are eligible. And again, if an individual needs to phase over time their payment plan, you know, it could be $1, it could be $5, it can be $15 over time. We want to help people get to the point where they're able to pay off the overpayment debt that they have, and have had many conversations with individuals about leniency on this front. So we are very open, and we understand that people are in a very challenging time and are working hard to get them those benefits that they so deeply need for the relief that they need. And we're willing to work with them and talk with them about how to make it affordable.
And that's calling, oh, sorry.
As well. Jillian, I can also go back to the point with regards to multiple states to clarify, make sure that it's super, super clear. You cannot claim in multiple states. You just can't. In terms of the claimants, they need to pick the state in which they want to make that claim, and we then do a cross-check with other states. So we can follow up with you on that as well.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you so much, Jillian.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to go to Connie Thompson. Connie, I think I've got your iPhone number.
Yes, can you hear me, Nick?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Commissioner. I have a person that contacted me who had his benefits stopped almost 7 weeks ago. He just got a letter this morning stating his benefits are now approved based on information that he provided. I know you can't speak to his case, but in general, in a situation like that, how soon could he expect his money to be released?
Well, if an individual has been filing weekly claims, then in general, they should be able to get, if an individual has direct deposit, somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for the banking system to push those funds through. And we are doing payments out most days. We don't do them on weekends, but most days we are doing them. And so an individual who then gets cleared, so to speak, and has that, it should just take a couple of days for them to receive those monies.
My second question, you indicated earlier, addressed the problem with the vendor regarding repeated prompts to upload information that's been uploaded before. What other problems in your communication process with customers have you identified, and how are you addressing them?
So I especially appreciate, Connie, how you phrased that, because there have been times when our language in our site is not as clear as it should be. And I'll give you an example. We now are taking an extra couple of days to analyze claims, whether it's the weekly claim or the initial claim that's coming in, before we pay people. And we rolled that out, and unfortunately, the language on the site made it feel like people's claims weren't accepted and that they were pending again. We are working on that. If it hasn't already been updated yesterday, it should be updated soon to better clarify what's going on, so that people know that it's not that their claim is pending, but rather that it could take 24 to 48 hours longer than they had expected for the payments to process. So it's a matter of how do we better integrate customer experience into when we roll things out, so that we can put the customer at the center of our work. And that has been one of the challenges in moving quickly and rolling things out in order to address rapidly the fraud that we had experienced and the attack that we had experienced and the volume that we had experienced, and now lengthening our stride and making sure that we're taking the time to do that customer experience moment and checking on the language, checking on how this could be perceived, so that we do that right. All right, having
so are you saying
that
you address, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Are you saying that you, if I'm hearing you correctly, are you saying that you identified ambiguous, confusing information and you're clarifying it? I'm just trying to get clear on what that means.
As we have shared throughout, we have done a lot to update language and to communicate and clarify things. And yes, we are identifying those areas on the site and in our service we could do better. And one of those, as an example that I gave, is around how we communicated the time that we need to do more analysis on claims. And we are working hard to change that language. A lot of the work, for example, that we did up front, where we developed guidelines, where we gave people application checklists. Throughout this process, we have worked hard to communicate to folks, here's how you navigate our system, knowing that it can be, that there's a lot of customer experience work to do throughout. And that has been consistent. We've been transparent about that, and we have put out a lot of materials to help people navigate through that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie.
Thank you. The next question is from Michelle. Michelle can't ask it herself, but she wants to know, given the governor's new proclamation impacting benefits, if someone's reached the end of their extended benefits but is at high risk and cannot work, can they still get benefits? So I think, Commissioner, this would be a great chance for you to explain some of the extensions that have already taken place, as well as some of the Federal CARES Act elements.
Absolutely. So if an individual, can you repeat Michelle's question, Nick?
Yeah, so I think it's specifically around Yeah, it's specifically around individuals who have reached the end of their benefits, but then as at high risk, what are the opportunities available to them? But I think some clarity around the extensions is also helpful.
One of the things that I want the team to look into before I answer that, and I'll come back to it, I believe that PEUC, which is the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program, which extends benefits by 13 weeks, also integrates the rules that are in PUA, but we need to check that first. I do not know if it only applies to the extension of UI or also to the extension of PUA rules. So let me get that answer first before going into more depth on that. Overall, when people's benefits run out for the 26 weeks, there is also PEUC, as I mentioned, extends it by 13 weeks. And then we in Washington State have already triggered an additional 20 weeks of extended benefits. So in total, 59 weeks are available for Washingtonians who are eligible. The question that I still want to explore is what that eligibility requirement is. And I'll explain a little bit why I want to have my team look into the nuance of this. When people are on unemployment insurance, there's a requirement that if you are able, you need to be able and available for work. So if you are given an offer to work in the job that you were in before, for example, you need to accept it. However, if you have, for example, some reason because of COVID-19, such as your kid's school or childcare is still closed due to COVID-19, and you're a single parent and you have to stay home with your child, you could be eligible for PUA. You may no longer be eligible for unemployment insurance, but you would be eligible for PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. My question to my team for them to look into and hopefully get back is that would you be able to use PEUC with the PUA rules? I know it's a lot of alphabet soup, and it's a little bit in the weeds on that. And what I'm hearing is that we'll circle back with the details on this, because I don't want to. I think I'm confusing folks about this in terms of, again, the alphabet soup, but we will come back and provide a really clear answer on whether, if your benefits have run out, the PUA rules apply to the PEUC timeframe and then to the extended benefits timeframe. That's the core question that I need to get answered, and I don't know the answer.
Thank you. We'll follow up with Michelle. Next, we're going to go to Tom Bonsi.
I think it's a really core question for folks.
Absolutely. Tom, go ahead.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Commissioner. I have a quick follow-up and then maybe one detail check after the big picture question on the National Guard. I'm intrigued that there are Guard members available, since they're already deployed to food banks statewide and then were called up to do crowd control at the protest demonstrations. Can you talk a little bit, Commissioner, about how much lobbying or pleading or whatever the right term is you had to do, or your staff had to do with the military department to get any members at all to help you from the Guard?
Again, the details of who and how many and when are still being worked out, but the governor was very much wanting to bring this force to bear, and I agreed and thought it was a great idea, and we're working with General Daugherty on it now.
Okay, just in your conversation, so do I hear from that the governor had the idea, pitched it to you, said, do you need Guard members? Would you take Guard members? Just give us a little more color on how quickly this came together.
The part with this is making sure that we have the resources that we need to get the job done. And in the conversations that I'm having regularly with the governor, we've been discussing many different ways to resource what we need. And this was one of the opportunities and options. And so that's how it came to fruition.
And then just on the timeline, you talked about the Guard members potentially starting next Monday. There's the goal to clear out the backlog. Sorry, go ahead.
Work that needs to be done to provision what they need in order to to be up to speed and running on this, as well as some training that will be involved.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was clicking in my head, that the date with the dates is the goal to have the backlog on ID verification checks done by next Friday, the 19th. By the time the Guard members are trained up, you'll probably be close or at the 19th. And so it sounds like it's more likely, maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that they would do the other tasks you suggested they maybe could work on.
There will be plenty of ID verification to do beyond the 42,000 that we've identified as individuals whose payments were stopped starting the weekend of May 15th and who are remaining in the queue. There are, the queue consists of other individuals who had not yet received payments but had also other issues, plus other individuals who have been identified for identity verification since then. So that work will continue past the 19th. And so they will be very helpful and instrumental in continuing to clear that queue and resolve that queue. And then there are additional pieces of work, tasks that can be trained that will help our broader set of individuals who are waiting for relief through our benefits.
That takes care of me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Paul Roberts. Paul, go ahead.
Morning. I sort of on Tom's question there. Can you give us a little more color into how many people you expect are going to be added to the queue for ID issues? And I guess, I'm looking at the, new claims, initial claims continue to fall in the state, but they're not falling as fast as the national numbers. And I'm curious about your perspective on, what degree to which that might reflect additional fraud that's coming in. I mean, you've kind of suggested here that this is a race that's not going to be over anytime soon, and that you'll be adding individual claims to that queue for further verification. What's your sense of the scope of that?
So identity verification and identity issues are flagged on an ongoing basis even before this crisis began. So it's something that will just continue because there are various elements that we look at that cause us to pause and want to evaluate those claims. That does not necessarily mean that they're all fraud. They are ones that we just need to dig into more deeply because of various characteristics. And I'm not going to go into more detail, as you know, because I don't want to give a roadmap to what we're looking for. So that is why those continue. And we continue to put forward our countermeasures that are helping us during this time. We do know that our site continues to be hit by people trying to do bad things. What we're also seeing, Paul, is an increase in things like spear phishing or folks trying to use social media to scam folks. And it is unbelievably awful that these criminals are trying to take advantage of the situation overall with the crisis related to COVID and with people who are trying to legitimately receive benefits.
Okay, I appreciate that. Sort of a unrelated question. On a personal level, have you or any member of your family had a fraudulent claim filed in your name?
So Paul, I don't use state resources to evaluate my situation or my family's situation. I am deeply focused on the work for Washingtonians overall, and I'm not going to disclose with regards to any claimant their information, myself included, but please know that I actually have not looked myself up, if that's your question.
All right, just that the auditor had mentioned that in her department and in her family, there'd been some claims. So I was just curious if you had.
Can you clarify? I'm sorry. What had you heard them say about my family?
No, not your family. I was just curious if since there were state employees that had been hit, and not just in this state. This has been pretty widespread. I was just curious if anyone in your family had a fraudulent claim filed on your behalf.
Again, I'm not going to discuss individual claimants, myself and my family included. And like I said, I don't use state resources to do anything related to my family, my friends, myself.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, next we're going to Steve Kiggins. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much for taking time. Just a couple of quick questions. I'm wondering if you might, Mr. Commissioner, if you might react to or share a comment regarding the lawsuit heading towards Supreme Court.
So I'm not going to comment on pending litigation, but what I will emphasize is the work that we are doing, and as you heard, the resources that we are applying in order to help those individuals whose payments have been paused starting May 15th to be able to get, for those legitimate claimants among them, to get their benefits restarted. And we will be resolving those. Our goal for those who have been receiving payments prior to May 15th is to resolve those by next Friday, June 19th. And for all those others still waiting for their initial payments, we are working hard and continuing to increase the capabilities of our staff as well as the volume of our staff in order to address their needs. And I hope that I've been able to demonstrate that we are really bringing every resource to bear to address this profound need in our state.
Thanks so much. Just one more question for you. If you could also shed some light on whether or not there's any truth to the matter regarding some claims by Senate Republicans that they believe that maybe $1 billion has been lost from the state?
That does not align with what we have seen and what we have shared. I shared publicly last week. And again, I hope people recognize we've been very forthright with the information. We've been very transparent and out as quickly as we do have some level of confidence or fidelity in the information that we have. And so last week I shared that we had been able to receive back about $337 million out of what we ballpark as between $550 and $650 million. I don't know where any other numbers might have come from, but that is what we believe will end up being the amount. That said, we are continuing to dig into the information. We are continuing to get more fidelity into the claims, and ultimately will provide a more definitive number, but that could take some time.
Commissioner, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you. We're going to go to Jim Camden. Jim, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioner. Just kind of a detailed question and following up on what Paul was asking, because he mentioned that new claims are not falling as fast in Washington as in some parts of the rest of the country. Can you estimate how much of the claims from last week are legitimate versus how much might be fraudulent? And because I looked at some of the areas where numbers are going up, like in food services, and it would seem those should be going down because the restaurants are opening up.
So in terms of us receiving and or processing new claims that are fraudulent, I believe that number is very, 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 very low, if any. In terms of whether there are certain areas that are seeing increases, I will ask Stephen Ross in order to speak to what we may be seeing in certain industries or in certain areas and how we are evaluating that. Stephen?
Good morning, everybody. So generally, we're seeing claims drop across the board. With the local Washington economy, it's important to note that when we talk about the impacts of this pandemic, that these are things that we can't necessarily predict or chalk up as normal anymore. And that was something that was normal prior to the pandemic when comparing state-to-state economies at a more macro level. And so each state's going to have its own story. But I would encourage you all to head over to esd.wa.gov and then go to the labor market information site. There we've got all of the monthly employment numbers for industries, and we've also got industry claim breakouts. And there's also an opportunity to contact myself and our regional economists if there's a specific area or industry that you have in mind.
Okay, Stephen, while we've got you on the phone, actually, I'm sorry, Jim, did you have another follow-up?
No, I was just saying thank you. I was trying to be polite.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Stephen, while we've got you on there, we've got a question in the chat around, do we have an estimate of how many people in Washington have been laid off since mid-March? And then I know I answered a little bit in the side chat as well, but can you also differentiate between layoffs versus claims and the multiple claim question?
Of course, and my apologies if I get a little too technical, but when it comes to layoffs versus claims, it's important to note that with the unemployment insurance program, traditionally you see people are eligible because of a layoff. But there are some unique circumstances that other individuals are able to get unemployment insurance benefits. And so it's really important to note that when we talk about unemployment insurance claims and those numbers, there's not a direct correlation to an equal number of layoffs. And so we have provided claimant information, and it's really important to distinguish between claims and claimants when it comes to our numbers that get released every Thursday. And so we've seen since the beginning of March, going to Jennifer's question, about a little over 1.1 million new claimants seeking unemployment insurance and some of these other federal benefits. Now, that being said, there are some other reasons besides layoffs that naturally could occur that individuals could be seeking these benefits. But that sort of gives us the best wheelhouse that we have when it comes to predicting the number of layoffs. And it's also important to note that there's different types of claims as well when you look at these press releases. And some of these claims can be submitted multiple times. And so we just want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples to answer those questions. And again, we have staff available to answer any further questions when it comes to those unique details if we need to clarify anything further.
And I'll give one example of that as well, Stephen, that will become especially relevant in the next couple of weeks as we talk more about getting back to work, and that is shared work. Shared work is a program that allows businesses to reduce the hours of their employees by 10 to 50% and to utilize unemployment insurance to provide partial wage replacement for those hours. It's a great option for businesses, especially while FPUC, the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program, which adds the $600 per week to an individual's benefits, is live, which goes through the end of July, because it allows them to get that unemployment insurance benefit and to be able to get the $600 on top of that. So it could be a great way for a business that needs to slowly restart and or bring back a reduced number of people, or to share the hours across multiple people that they might have reduced overall. So we could see individuals who are not laid off, but who start becoming claimants and or making claims within that shared work program as a part of that population. Now, is that number huge? Not currently, but it would be great if it did become larger as businesses restart, because also it is paid as a part of the Federal CARES Act. It is one of the areas that the federal government is covering the costs of.
Thank you. We're going to go. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And to be clear, that 1.1 million new claimants, does that include the fraud claims, or have those been subtracted out?
That includes the fraud claims as well. That is all of the claims overall that we have received.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Paul Roberts for the last question for a follow-up. Paul, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Sorry. So do we have any estimate of the total number of fraudulent claims? I mean, you come up with a ballpark figure for dollars lost. What does that translate to in terms of claims? So that'd be the first question. The second would be, what does this mean for the overall unemployment figure that we've been using, say for April? I mean, if a large percentage or a significant percentage turn out to be fraudulent, what does that tell us about the actual unemployment figures?
Paul, thank you so much for asking on both of those. I'll let Stephen speak to the second point, but on the first one, when we've been able to make our way through these identity verification numbers, we'll have a much better sense. But right now, we still don't have a good enough view of what are the fraudulent claims distinguished from the legitimate claims. So I am not yet ready to share that, and we're not ready overall to share that information. I've said before it's tens of thousands, and I remain focused on that number and that phrase, that characterization of our number, but we don't yet have the number of claims that I am comfortable sharing yet.
Okay, but I mean on that, if you're somehow coming up with a ballpark figure for total dollars, so how are you deriving that if you don't yet have and you're comfortable enough with that number to share? How are you deriving that if you don't yet have a number of claims that you're comfortable with?
Paul, I'm not going to go into the details of it because some of it discloses some of the techniques that we're taking in order to stop the criminals. So once we have a number with which we're confident, we will be able to share that with you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then to the unemployment figure?
Stephen?
Thank you, Paul. So when it comes to the unemployment figure, yes, fraudulent claims being included in the claim counts and tracking these populations does impact the unemployment rate. And we do have different unemployment rates that get put out there. So there's the covered unemployment rate that you'll see come from ESD, and then there's the sort of macro unemployment rate that you'll see come from the Economic Revenue Forecast Council, all of which have a differencing impact when it comes to that claim variable and how they calculate the unemployment rate. And like we mentioned before in previous weeks, I think especially looking at the unemployment rate, I mean, it gives you a general pulse on what we're seeing in the economy, and everybody knows what we're seeing and feeling in the economy right now. It's a tough spot to be in, and we're in a recession. But there's so many more impactful numbers that do not oversimplify the situation that Washingtonians are in, unlike the unemployment rate. So we have other unemployment numbers that are out there on our website that are really good to look at. There's tracking of industry claims. There's a lot of information out there that better tells the story of what Washingtonians are going through and the economic impacts of Washington. And again, be happy to offer up resources to help elaborate on that more.
All right, I mean, fair enough, but it's just at some point, the overall impact, however we're measuring it, will be, one would imagine, altered somewhat, as we know how many of those claims coming in didn't represent actual jobless Washingtonians. Is that correct?
There will be a benchmarking process, but there's a lot of Washingtonians that are not criminals that have been applying for unemployment benefits. And I think we can all safely say that the trend that we've seen in the unemployment rate fairly adequately reflects that in which the Washingtonians are feeling right now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, Commissioner, are there any closing remarks you'd like to offer?
Well, I want to just recognize that this is a national phenomenon in terms of this attack that's happened, but it's also a national phenomenon in which our services and our systems for unemployment benefits have been helping millions of people throughout the United States, and in Washington, over 800,000 individuals have been able to receive some form of benefit with over $5 billion put into their pockets, and that is truly exceptional. And we are managing and working through with an incredible team at ESD so many different challenges, and I thank you for the opportunity to share the work that we are doing, both in getting those benefits out to those who are legitimate and eligible, as well as to stop the fraud from going out to those who are criminal. So thank you very much for your continued attention to this.